My name's Alan Larsson, and I'm an assistant professor at the UCL here in Odense, and I'm here joined with Alexander Osterwalder. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So the business model canvas and the business model thinking, what is that all about?
So basically when we started out, we wanted to try to find a way to help people better sketch out their business ideas. So we started with the startup world, and now we work with companies around the world. But it was really just to take things out of people's heads and put them onto a business model canvas. Because we believe back then, when I say we, with my co-author Eve, we believed the business plan approach was not very good. And now even more than ever before, we think it's stupid to write business plans. Mm-hmm. You want to make business models very rapidly and then go test them. So that's the whole idea.
Okay, why rapidly?
Well, because the initial idea, people always think, oh, I need to find the great idea and then that I will succeed. Ideas are overrated, they're free, they're everywhere. Ideas are the easiest part. What's hard is to adapt an idea to the real world, which means you start with an idea and then you constantly test it so that you find a business model that can scale and a value proposition that can work. So those are the two things you need to be able to do. Create value for customers and create value for the business. Mm-hmm. Which sounds trivial, but it's actually hard to figure out what will really work. And you'll never figure it out in a meeting room and in a business plan. You need to test and adapt.
My experience is that the leaders that we train have they are very good at coming up with ideas. But these ideas rarely have traction, you know. Yeah. They rarely gain traction. Why is that? What happens?
Because the ideas don't matter. So really what you want to do is start with some kind of vision. Entrepreneurs and great leaders have a vision. But what's important is to make sure your vision is not a hallucination. Mm-hmm. And in Denmark, there's a wonderful example, actually, which I like, is Better Place. Yeah. You might remember, right? They had this great vision of creating electric vehicles and battery swapping stations. On paper, that all looked great. Oh, what a wonderful idea, right? Biggest pain, it's hard to charge cars. Great. They made a business plan, they made a spreadsheet, they got a lot of investors on board, and they lost $850 million. Mm-hmm. Why is it? Because they mistook their vision for actually something, their hallucination for vision. So what they could have done differently is admit when you start something really new, you don't know if it's going to work. That's number one. You start, the idea looks great, but you need to admit you don't know. Mm-hmm. That's very hard. Mm-hmm. And then the bigger your ego, the more you think it's going to work. And as an entrepreneur or innovator, you need to believe it's going to work. But there is a difference between vision and believing you can make it work and arrogance. Mm-hmm. So you need to let go of your arrogance and you need to test your idea. So you will find traction. Traction doesn't happen because of your idea. Traction is something you create because you deeply understood customer jobs, pains and gains. You deeply understood how can you make this revenue stream work? What's the pricing mechanism? What's the right price? These are things you discover. You don't find them out in a meeting room. You discover them by testing.
And you do that by small increments, right? Small increments.
So there's another myth where people say, it's all about the money. If I only could raise, money, I could realize my idea. Money's the easiest part. Or people in organizations, they actually get big budgets to innovate, but then they waste it because they do technology innovation. Mm-hmm. What you want to do is start very small. You want to talk to maybe 10 customers or 100 customers, depending on the kind of market you're in. You'll learn that you were probably wrong. So the entrepreneur's biggest skill is to be humiliated every day and to be told that's stupid, that's wrong, until you figure out what really works. And the more you learn, the more you can invest in your experiments until you actually build something. So you never start by building something when you test. You start by finding evidence, proof, like a detective if you want, that there are real customer pains, that they're willing to pay for something. You don't need a lot of money to figure that out.
So what about the value proposition? What's that all about?
So again, there's two things you need to get right as an entrepreneur and innovator. How am I going to create value for customers? And how am I going to create value for the business? So the business model canvas helps with the business part. The value proposition canvas helps with the value part. So what that means is you need to deeply understand customers, but you can simplify it down to three essential things you need to understand. Mm-hmm. First one, What are they trying to get done? We call that jobs to be done. It's a concept, coming from Clay Christensen and Tony Ulwick. The second and the third is, what are the biggest pains that are holding them back from doing a thing well? And what are the objectives? What do they want to achieve? Once you start to understand the jobs, pains, and gains of your customers, it's relatively easy to understand how can your products and services create value. How do you create value? Two things. You kill pains and you create gains. It's like a headache pill and a vitamin, right? How do you kill pains and create gains? So you need to make that explicit and understand how that works. It's not, oh, I'm going to build this. This is just a product. If this product doesn't connect with things that customers want to get done, the product doesn't matter.
It has no value.
It has no value. There is no such thing as this creating value in an absolute term. It's in the context of a specific customer segment. In this case, it's the mass market. But if you're a medical device manufacturer, robotics, it's really about how am I helping customers get a job done.
All right. Let me paint you a small picture from our side of the fence where we are working. We are training leaders and managers in the robotics industry in Odense. Yeah. And some of these companies are actually growing exponentially right now, and they are worldwide. And if we, I'll give you an example from Mobile Industrial Robots, which is a worldwide company, very successful. The leading on autonomous self-driving robots in the workplace. It can't really do anything, just drive from A to B. That's what it can do. Then there's something, then the other part comes in, which are the subcontractors that builds stuff for this platform, sort of. Things that can grab stuff or move from A to B or something like that. So where would you start if you had to develop something really unique? Where would you start?
So if we take robotics as a general theme, and we take entrepreneurs in the space of robotics, there's a risk that they're too much in love with technology, and they focus on, okay, how is this technology going to create value? And they do, often come up with good value propositions. But what sometimes technology entrepreneurs tend to neglect, in particular in engineering and this kind of space, is the business model. And that can sometimes be a difference, of hundreds of millions of dollars. I'll give you an example. If you build robots and you sell them, that's very transactional. So you have a cost of sales, and you have to sell again and again and again. And then, once you've sold to a large part of the market, you need to reinvent something new and try to sell to the same people, right? So it's a sales model that has a huge cost of sales. That's a traditional, we build something, we sell it. And that can work well, and in particular when you have some intellectual property to protect it, that can work well for a while. Like Dyson is an example outside of robotics, but in engineering. The challenge is just that business model is getting insanely difficult to maintain, because there's very, very good technology entrepreneurs around the world. Copying gets faster and faster. So I believe in this space you need to start to think of business models with recurring revenues. How could you actually generate revenues not just once by selling, but continuously? And a silly example from a completely different industry that I like to use is Nespresso, right? The coffee machine with pods. They actually turned a transactional industry, buying coffee. You could just change your coffee vendor any day, every coffee brand. And then they locked you in because you could only put one type of pod in the machine. So think of the equivalent. What if a robotics manufacturer could create that kind of lock-in where the customer will pay continuously all the time recurring revenues? That can be a difference between tens of millions and hundreds of millions to billions. So that's the kind of thing that technology entrepreneurs need to develop more. And when you're growing fast and business looks good, you tend to think, everything's fine. But there's various examples where transactional business models have gone up like a rocket and then fallen down like a stone. The good example is GoPro. It's not that's consumer, but still, everybody hyped GoPro. Everybody had a GoPro camera, And that is a very transactional model, and they couldn't even protect the intellectual property. So once the market changed, they fell like a rock. That's a transactional model. Transactional models are very hard to maintain.
Okay. Tende, your partner at Strategizer, he coined it very elegantly, I think. He said that it's like teaching an elephant to do ballet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then that's I'd say what's hard is people are not even aware that there is a whole other opportunity out there because they're so in love with the technology. And I'm not saying that's not important, right? Without the technology, these companies wouldn't be where they are. But you need to understand that today the competitive advantage, the long-term competitive advantage, comes from better business models. And that's where there's a lot of room for improvement, in particular for technology entrepreneurs, but even for very established business people. Very, very established business people who manage billions of dollars don't understand business models well enough, which is kind of funny, right? Because it's a very basic theme. So we like to say it's back to basics. It's not even dancing ballet, it's just trying to, very basic dance moves, but they're very powerful. That's the interesting thing. Today is a little bit of a back to the basics in terms of better value propositions, better business models, and we try to teach those basics again because they can make a fundamental difference.
So you deal with strategy, you could say, and when Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yeah. And I think that's very accurate. Yeah, very accurate. So where's that in the canvas?
So it's not, deliberately not. So there's this. Let me frame it this way: when you have to go through heart surgery, you wouldn't want your surgeon to show up with a Swiss Army knife, right? You'd be pretty panicked, right? So it's the same in business, you know. We think, oh, a business tool needs to say everything. No, it doesn't, because if it does, it's a Swiss Army knife. It will do a lot of things, but it won't do anything well. And I love Swiss Army knives. I'm Swiss, right? Swiss. But I think we need to operate more like surgeons. So business people need to get more sophisticated in the type of business tools they use and use a collection of tools. The business model canvas does one thing: map out business models, either new ones, existing ones. Value proposition canvas does one thing: map out the value proposition. So funny enough, we came up with a tool called the culture map to work on the topic of culture, corporate culture, company culture. So I believe business people need to be able to take these tools and use them when they need them. And what all these tools have in common is they take this problem, culture, and they make it very tangible so you can visualize it and work on it. So I do think culture is incredibly important. That's why we came up with a tool. In our case, we looked at it for innovation culture, so you can design and manage culture. I think that's a huge difference with the past. Culture doesn't just happen. Nope. Every company has culture. Very few actively design and manage it. Some do, and that's going to be very popular. Netflix is an example. HubSpot is an example. They actually put their slide decks of their culture on the internet, and they got millions of views. Isn't that crazy? Like, who would go and look at the culture code of a company? That sounds like the most boring thing on the planet. Turns out millions of people went to watch the Netflix culture code or the HubSpot culture code.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because let me put it this way, many company cultures, they suck. Because the companies don't create a great company culture. They let it happen. In particular, in large organizations today, you know, there's these polls that show that 7 out of 10 people are not engaged at work. Basically, that means they don't want to do the work they do at the place they work. 7 out of 10? Yeah. That's insane. It's insane. That means that a lot of people are unhappy. We spend 8 hours, in Switzerland, 8.5 hours per day at work. That's crazy. You can't be unhappy for 8 hours per day. That's crazy, right?
It's crazy. Yeah. It's also some theme later today with the mindfulness stuff as well.
And I'll talk about culture specifically in my talk. Okay. It'll be, the whole thing is about culture. How do you create an innovation culture in addition to the execution culture? So it's not either or, it's both. World-class companies are excellent at execution and they're excellent at innovation. It's not either or, it's and.
Great. All right. You just beat me to my next question. That was, what are you going to talk about
perfect. There we got it.
Today? But do you mind if we just take a look at the canvas now, and you can explain how it works? It's really not that complicated.
That's complicated. Simple.
Yeah, it's simple. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
So when it's too complicated, it doesn't work.
It
needs to be simple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's go take a look.
Let's do that. Sounds good.
So Alex, could you explain what the business model canvas is all about?
So basically, when we started out, I did a PhD on the topic, funny enough, right? And this is kind of the easiest layer. We tried to figure out what are the core components of every business, but at the strategic level. So not the details of the processes, but what's the business model? And there are 9 components. With 9 components, you describe any business model, from startup to large company, doesn't matter, right? Any industry. And it's pretty straightforward. So basically, you describe what are the value propositions. How are you creating value for which customer? That's the foundation, right? Then you ask, how am I reaching my customers? What are the channels? Is it a sales force? Is it through the internet? Is it through personal networks? Once you're doing business with a company, you decide what kind of relationships do I establish? Is it automated like Amazon? Is it personal like a private bank? Is it key account management where one key account manager manages one business account? And then you ask, how do I earn money? What are the revenue streams? Am I selling? Do I have a fixed price? Do I negotiate the price? Do I have a subscription? Is it an auction where I auction off search terms like Google, which made them insanely rich? You have to figure out how do you best capture value. I like to call this the front stage. Everything is visible to the customer. Then as a business, you need to ask, what do I need to have to create value? What kind of key resources? What are the most important assets? Do I need factories? Do I need intellectual property? Do I need technology? Do I need a brand? And then key activities. What do I need to be really good at doing? Do I need to be world-class at marketing? Do I need to be world-class at coming up with new drugs for the pharma market? And which partners do I work with here to leverage key activities and key resources? And then I know the costs. What is the cost structure? And at the end of the day, business is easy. You need to make more money than you spend. But it's like a theater. Front stage, that everything is visible. Backstage, behind the curtain, what I need to have to make this possible. This allows me to capture value. This is what costs money. This needs to be bigger than this. So it's like an equation. And that's why this works so well, because it's the 9 components. There are no other components. You change one here, you don't have a business model anymore. You break the model, you break the equation. So this here, how much I earn, how much I need to spend to earn, is a result of the decisions I make here. It's like a strategic playground.
And you do this all the time, right? You do it in increments and you work on it continuously.
Yeah. A big mistake that people make is they spend too much time thinking about the perfect business model without testing the underlying assumption. If I have an idea and I map it out here and it looks great, I have to stay humble and say, I don't know if it's going to work. Let me ask, what needs to be true for this idea to work? And then I go test those things. And then I find evidence that that could work. I talk to customers, I talk to the supply chain. I need to show that this can really work in the field. And it's very likely that I'll be wrong. Most of the case, if you do something new, you're wrong, you will learn, you change the model. So you constantly adapt this. You throw it away every day, right?
So you don't use too much money on it.
Exactly. You don't overthink it. You just test it all the time. So the big mistake that first-time founders make, or even companies make, they spend too much time with analysis. And I call it an analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah.
You need to get out of the building. It's very popular now. Steve Blank in Silicon Valley made this popular. You need to test and adapt. It's like throwing away your business plan all the time until you can show this is really going to work. You actually prove that this is not a crazy bet, but you have evidence that this is a very good idea.
All right. Could we look at the value proposition
just
fast?
Yeah. So, with this tool, we wanted to make explicit how do you create value for your customers with your products and services, right? So, products and services, they never create value in a vacuum. Though, if I ask an entrepreneur, how does that create value? They'll always tell you, oh, it does this, it goes faster, and I don't care about faster unless customers care. So what does that mean? I first need to map out what really matters to the customer. One particular segment. What are they trying to get done? We call these jobs to be done. What is holding them back from doing this well? Those are the pains, the headaches, things that they don't like. And what do they want to achieve? Those are the gains. Once I understand jobs, pains, and gains, maybe I can even quantify. Oh, I'm a customer, I'm at a Starbucks coffee, waiting time. 10 minutes is a pain. Oh, 2 minutes is a gain, right? So I start to understand my customer, and now, when I have my products and services, I can understand, does this actually relieve a pain over here? Does this create a gain? So you make explicit how your products and services matter to customers. And that's the key word, you make explicit. And again, you're not going to get it right the first time.
No.
You're going to test, change until you get it right.
Small increments.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Good.
Thank you.
My pleasure.